Thanks for the party, Emily. The champagne glass slipped from my sister's perfectly manicured fingers, shattering against the marble floor of our family's estate. The sound echoed through the suddenly silent room as 50 pairs of eyes darted between us. My name is Olivia Pierce, and according to all legal documents filed by my dear sister 3 months ago, I was supposed to be dead. Emily's face had drained of all color, her crimson lipstick now a stark contrast against her pale skin. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was the one who looked like she'd seen a ghost. That's impossible, she stammered, gripping the edge of the antique dining table. You're supposed to be dead, I supplied helpfully, stepping further into the room. In a tragic hiking accident in Nepal, wasn't it? Body never recovered. Such a shame. I smiled, holding up the stack of documents in my hand. Funny thing about death certificates, they're much harder to fake than you'd think. The party guests, mostly family friends and business associates, began whispering among themselves. I recognized most of them, the same people who had attended my father's funeral last year, who had watched Emily and me grow up, who had apparently just been toasting to my untimely demise. I hadn't planned on making such a dramatic entrance. Originally, I was going to handle this quietly through lawyers. But when I received the invitation to my own memorial celebration, forwarded by my old college roommate who was genuinely concerned, something in me snapped. The sheer audacity of Emily hosting a party to celebrate her inheritance of our father's empire, using my death as the catalyst, deserved a more theatrical response. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced, my voice carrying across the room, I apologize for interrupting the festivities, but as you can see, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Emily had recovered enough to force a brittle laugh. Olivia, darling. What a surprise. We were told, that I died in a remote part of Nepal 3 months ago. I raised an eyebrow. Yes, I heard. Quite the story you came up with. Although next time, you might want to check if your supposedly dead sister has actually left the country before filing a death certificate. The truth was, I'd been in Boston the entire time, working with private investigators and lawyers to build a case against my sister. While Emily had been telling everyone I was off on some spiritual journey in Nepal, I'd actually been gathering evidence of her systematic attempt to steal my inheritance. Our father, Jonathan Pierce, had built Pierce Industries from the ground up. When he died last year, his will was clear. The company and his assets were to be split equally between Emily and me. Neither of us could sell our shares without the other's consent, and major decisions required mutual agreement. It was his way of ensuring we'd work together, protecting his legacy. Emily had other ideas. This is ridiculous, Emily snapped, finally finding her footing. Where have you been? We searched everywhere. We had search parties in Nepal, hired local guides. No, you didn't, I countered calmly, because there was never any search. There were no guides. There wasn't even a flight booking in my name to Nepal. Would you like me to share the documentation proving that with everyone here? The room had grown impossibly quiet. These people had known our family for years, had watched Emily and me grow up. They had attended my high school graduation, my college commencement, had celebrated my promotions within Pierce Industries. Now they were witnessing something none of them had expected, the systematic unraveling of a carefully orchestrated fraud. I can explain, Emily began, but I cut her off. Oh, I'm sure you can. Just like you explained to the board how I'd signed over my voting rights to you before my tragic accident. Or how you explained to the estate lawyer that I'd amended my will to leave everything to you. I turned to address the crowd. Did my sister mention that part during the toast? How convenient it was that I'd supposedly changed my will just weeks before my death. A will that left my entire share of Pierce Industries, worth roughly $2 million, to her. The whispers grew louder. I could see several board members exchanging concerned glances. They had voted to approve Emily's takeover of my position based on documents she had provided, documents that were now obviously fraudulent. You're ruining everything, Emily hissed, stepping closer to me. Her perfectly composed facade was cracking, revealing the desperation beneath. I had to do it. You were going to sell your shares. That's interesting, I replied, loud enough for everyone to hear, considering I'd never even discussed selling. In fact, the last conversation I had with the board was about expanding our renewable energy division. A plan you shut down the moment you thought I was out of the picture. I pulled out a specific document from my stack. Would anyone like to see the real estate listings Emily was already exploring? Apparently, she planned to sell our father's company to Magnus Corp as soon as she had full control. The same company Dad refused to sell to for years because of their terrible environmental record. Emily's face contorted with rage. You self-righteous bitch. You have no idea what it's been like, always being second best. Dad's perfect eldest daughter, the one who understood the business, who shared his vision. I was just the spare, the backup plan. So you decided to kill me off? I asked incredulously. File a fake death certificate, forge documents, and throw a party to celebrate. You weren't supposed to be here, she screamed, finally losing all composure. You were supposed to be in Nepal. The guides were paid to confirm your accident. Everything was perfect. The room fell silent again, but this time it was heavy with shock. Emily's words hung in the air, a confession none of us had expected. She had just admitted, in front of 50 witnesses, that she had orchestrated the whole thing. I saw Mr. Harrison, our family lawyer, already pulling out his phone. Several board members were doing the same. Emily must have realized what she had done because her face suddenly went slack with horror. I said quietly, this party is over. As if on cue, 2 police officers entered the room, followed by Detective Sarah Martinez, the lead investigator I'd been working with for the past 3 months. Emily's eyes darted between them and me, realization dawning. You planned this, she whispered. You knew I'd have this party. I nodded. Just like you planned my death. The difference is, my plan was legal. As the officers approached Emily, I felt no satisfaction, only a deep sadness. This was my sister, the same person who had held my hand at Dad's funeral, who had once been my closest confidant. Somewhere along the way, she had let bitterness and greed corrupt her completely. Miss Pierce, Detective Martinez said, addressing Emily, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud, forgery, and attempted theft by deception. We'll need you to come with us. Emily's face crumpled. Olivia, please, you can't do this. We're family. Yes, we are, I agreed, which is why I tried to protect you from yourself for years. But this, declaring me dead, trying to steal everything Dad built, that's not what family does. As the officers led Emily away, the party guests began to disperse, murmuring among themselves. I knew this would be all over the business news tomorrow. The Pierce family drama would make headlines. But right now, I couldn't bring myself to care. I walked over to the table where Emily had been standing minutes before, picking up the champagne bottle she'd been using for her toast. The label was from our father's private collection, wines he had been saving for special occasions. She had even raided his cellar while pretending to mourn me. Miss Pierce? Mr. Harrison approached cautiously. The board would like to meet first thing tomorrow morning to discuss reinstating your position and reviewing all decisions made during your absence. I nodded, still staring at the champagne bottle. I'll be there. And Harry? Make sure all company operations are frozen until we can verify every document Emily handled in the past 3 months. He hesitated. There's something else you should know. Your sister, she was in negotiations to sell Pierce Industries. The paperwork was nearly final. I know, I said quietly. I found the contracts. She would have signed them next week, wouldn't she? Yes. Once she was confident your death certificate wouldn't be questioned. I finally set down the champagne bottle. Well then, I guess it's good I crashed my own memorial party. As the last guest filed out, I found myself alone in the vast dining room of our family estate. Family photos lined the walls. Mom and Dad on their wedding day. Emily and me as children, the 4 of us on vacation. Happy memories that now felt tainted by Emily's betrayal. The sound of heels clicking when marble made me turn. Detective Martinez had returned. We'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement, she said. Your sister's already asking for a lawyer. Of course she is, I murmured. She always was good at looking out for herself. The detective studied me for a moment. You know, in all my years on the force, I've never had someone work this hard to gather evidence against their own sibling. Most people would have just confronted her immediately. I thought about that. Why had I spent 3 months building a case instead of exposing Emily right away? The answer came easily. Because I needed to understand why, I explained. I needed to know if this was a desperate act or if she had really planned to erase me. to take everything Dad built and sell it off like it meant nothing. And now you know, Detective Martinez said gently. Yes, I agreed, looking around the room one last time. Now I know. The morning after my dramatic return from the dead, I sat in my father's old office at Pierce Industries, surrounded by the remnants of Emily's brief reign. She had redecorated, of course, replaced Dad's vintage photographs of our first factory with modern abstract art, swapped his worn leather chair for something sleek and chrome. It was as if she had tried to erase every trace of him, just as she had tried to erase me. The board is ready for you, my assistant, Michael, announced from the doorway. He had been one of the few people who had questioned Emily's story about my death, though she had quickly silenced his doubts with threats of termination. I stood smoothing down my blazer. How many are here? All 12 members, he replied. And your mother called. Again. I closed my eyes briefly. Margaret Pierce, my stepmother, had been blowing up my phone since last night. She had conveniently missed my memorial celebration due to a spa retreat in the Hamptons. Now she was desperate to explain how she had no idea what Emily, her precious daughter, had been planning. Tell her I'll call back after the board meeting, I said, knowing I probably wouldn't. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. These people had known me for years, some since I was a child visiting Dad at work. Yet 3 months ago, they had believed Emily's lies without question, accepting my supposed death without investigation. Good morning, I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. I believe we have a lot to discuss. Harrison Woods, our lead counsel, cleared his throat. Miss Pierce, on behalf of the board, I want to express our deepest apologies. We should have verified the documentation more thoroughly. Yes, you should have, I cut in. But that's not why we're here. I need to know exactly what my sister did during her 3 months in control. The next 2 hours were a systematic dismantling of Emily's schemes. She hadn't just planned to sell the company, she had been deliberately weakening it to force a sale. Canceled contracts with long-term clients, dismissed key personnel, halted expansion into renewable energy. She claimed these were all part of your final wishes, board member Janet Chen explained, looking uncomfortable. That before your trip to Nepal, you had expressed concerns about the company's direction, and none of you thought to question why I'd suddenly abandoned the renewable energy project I spent 2 years developing. I asked quietly. The silence was telling. After the meeting, I retreated to my office to review the stack of documents Michael had prepared. Employee terminations, project cancellations, property sales. Emily had been busy, but something wasn't adding up. My phone buzzed again. Margaret. This time I answered. Olivia, darling. Her voice dripped with false concern. I've been trying to reach you. This horrible misunderstanding with Emily. Misunderstanding? I interrupted. She declared me dead, Margaret. That's not a misunderstanding. That's fraud. She was confused, desperate. You know how hard it's been for her, living in your shadow. If you just talk to her. She's in jail, I reminded her. And based on the evidence we've gathered, she'll be there for quite a while. There was a pause, then Margaret's voice turned cold. You always were heartless, just like your father. Emily needs our help, not our judgment. What she needs is a good lawyer, I replied. And speaking of lawyers, they'll want to talk to you too, about the death certificate you helped her file. The sharp intake of breath told me I had hit a nerve. I don't know what you're talking about. No. So you didn't sign as a witness? Didn't provide a statement about my last known whereabouts? The paperwork has your signature, Margaret. The line went dead. I set down the phone, unsurprised. Margaret had always favored Emily, her biological daughter from her first marriage. When she married Dad 15 years ago, she had brought 4-year-old Emily into our lives. I was 7, old enough to remember how Margaret had systematically tried to push me aside, to make Emily the center of everything. Dad had been oblivious, too caught up in running the company to notice the subtle manipulation. Or maybe he had noticed but chose to ignore it for the sake of peace. Either way, it had created a dynamic that ultimately ended with Emily trying to have me declared dead. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Detective Martinez stood there, looking grimmer than usual. We need to talk, she said, closing the door behind her. We found something in your sister's apartment. She placed a file on my desk. Inside were emails between Emily and Magnus Corp, dating back 6 months, long before Dad's death. She was planning this before he died, I realized, scanning the correspondence. She was negotiating with Magnus while Dad was still alive. There's more, Martinez said quietly. We found some interesting financial transfers, large sums of money moving through offshore accounts all tied to your sister and your stepmother. I looked up sharply. Margaret was involved. It appears so. And there's something else you should know. Martinez hesitated. We've been investigating Magnus Corp for various financial irregularities. Your sister's involvement with them. It goes beyond just selling the company. She was helping them hide money using Pierce Industries as a front. The implications hit me hard. This wasn't just about inheritance or sibling rivalry. Emily had been involved in something much bigger, much darker. I need to see her, I said suddenly. Martinez raised an eyebrow. Are you sure that's wise? No, I admitted. But I need to understand why. Really why. An hour later, I sat in an interview room at the county jail, waiting. When Emily was brought in, the contrast to yesterday's polished party hostess was stark. Without her makeup and designer clothes, she looked younger, vulnerable. Come to gloat? She asked, sitting down across from me. How long were you working with Magnus? I asked instead. She stiffened slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. We found the emails, Emily, and the offshore accounts. Margaret's involvement. All of it. I leaned forward. What I don't understand is why. Dad left us both equal shares. You didn't need to declare me dead to be successful. Equal shares, she laughed bitterly. That's rich. You really don't get it, do you? It was never about the shares. It was about proving I could do what you couldn't, make the tough decisions, take the company into the future. By selling it to Magnus, the company Dad spent his life building. Magnus understands business. Not this tree-hugging renewable energy nonsense you've been pushing. They were going to make Pierce Industries global. They were using you, I said quietly, to hide money, probably illegal funds. Did you really think they'd keep you around once they had control? Something flickered in her eyes. Doubt, maybe fear. You don't know anything. I know Magnus is under federal investigation. I know Margaret's been moving money through offshore accounts for months. And I know you're facing serious charges, fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. Stop, she whispered. Help me understand, Emily. Was it worth it? Trying to erase me, betraying everything Dad built, just to prove you could. She stared at her hands for a long moment. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. He always loved you more. His real daughter. The one who understood business, who shared his precious vision. Do you know what it's like, growing up in that shadow? So you decided to eliminate the shadow? I asked. Mom said. She said it would be easy. File the death certificate, take control, make the sale. No one would look too closely. You were always traveling anyway, always too busy for family. She wiped her eyes. It wasn't supposed to be like this. No, I agreed softly. It wasn't. I stood to leave, but her voice stopped me. What happens now? I turned back. Now I have to save our father's company from the mess you and Margaret created. And you have to face the consequences of your choices. Walking out of the jail, I called Detective Martinez. I need everything you have on Magnus Corp, I said, and I want to know exactly how deep Margaret's involvement goes. Already working on it, she replied. But Olivia, be careful. People who move this kind of money don't like exposure. I looked up at the Pierce Industries building gleaming in the afternoon sun. Dad had built this company from nothing, turned it into something that mattered. He trusted Emily and me to protect it together. One of us had betrayed that trust, but I was still here, still standing, and I had work to do. Send me what you have, I told Martinez. It's time to find out exactly what my sister and stepmother have been hiding. The sunlight caught the building's windows, reflecting like 1,000 watching eyes. Somewhere in those offices, in computers and filing cabinets, lay the truth about how deep this conspiracy went. Emily might have tried to erase me, but she'd failed. Now it was my turn to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The files spread across my desk painted a disturbing picture. For the past 3 hours, I had been piecing together the web of transactions between Pierce Industries, Magnus Corp., and various shell companies. Each connection led to something darker. Miss Pierce? Michael appeared at my door. There's someone here from the FBI. I looked up to see a tall woman in a dark suit. Agent Lisa Kendrick, She introduced herself, showing her credentials. "We need to talk about Magnus Corp. And your stepmother." "I was wondering when you'd show up," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. "Detective Martinez mentioned a federal investigation, which just became a lot more interesting thanks to the evidence you uncovered." She sat down, studying me carefully. "Do you know what your sister and stepmother were really involved in?" I gestured to the files. "Money laundering through offshore accounts, using Pierce Industries as a front for Magnus Corp's illegal activities." "That's part of it," Kendrick nodded. "But Magnus isn't just hiding money. They're hiding weapons deals." The word hit me like a physical blow. Weapons? Magnus Corp has a secret division specializing in arms trading. Your stepmother's connections in Europe provided the perfect cover for moving both money and merchandise. Pierce Industries' legitimate shipping routes would have made ideal smuggling channels. My mind raced. The canceled contracts, the dismissed employees, the sudden interest in our shipping division. It all made horrible sense. "Emily," I started. "Was probably in over her head," Kendrick finished. "But Margaret Pierce knew exactly what she was doing. We've been building a case against her for months. Your death actually helped us. It made them sloppy." My phone buzzed, an unknown number. "Roof. Now, come alone or documents go public." I showed it to Kendrick. "Looks like someone's nervous." She reached for her phone, but I stopped her. "Wait, let me handle this." "Miss Pierce, these people are dangerous. They're also desperate. Let me talk to them first. Have your team ready, but don't move in unless necessary." She hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. Then we come in. The roof of Pierce Industries had always been my favorite place to think. Dad and I used to come up here sometimes, looking out over the city he loved. Now, Margaret stood at the edge, her designer outfit immaculate as always. "I was wondering when you figure it out," she said without turning around. "The weapons, the money laundering, using Dad's company as a front." I moved closer. "I'm still trying to understand how you could do this to him." She laughed, a brittle sound. "Your father was a fool. All that potential, all those resources, and he wanted to invest in wind farms and solar panels. Magnus saw the real opportunity, so you decided to turn his life's work into a smuggling operation. I decided to make it profitable." She finally turned to face me. "Emily was supposed to handle things quietly. The death certificate, the transfer of power, it should have been clean. But she couldn't even manage that properly." "She's your daughter," I said, disgusted. "You used her, manipulated her into committing fraud." "Oh, spare me the moral outrage," Margaret snapped. "Emily was weak, too concerned with proving herself to you and Jonathan. She couldn't see the bigger picture." "And what picture is that?" "Running guns through my father's company. Do you have any idea how much money there is in arms trading? Magnus was going to make us all rich. Now," she pulled out a flash drive. "Now I have enough evidence to destroy everything your father built. One email to the press, and Pierce Industries' involvement in weapons smuggling goes public." I took a step closer. "You really think it's going to work? The FBI already knows everything." Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or desperation. "You're bluffing. Agent Kendrick is downstairs right now. They've been investigating Magnus for months. Emily's arrest just gave them the opening they needed." "Then I have nothing to lose," she said, moving back toward the edge. "Your precious company's reputation won't survive this scandal." "That's where you're wrong," I said calmly, "because while you and Emily were busy trying to erase me, I was gathering evidence. Not just about the fraud, but about everything, every transaction, every shell company, every connection to Magnus. And do you know what I found?" She stared at me, waiting. "I found proof that you and Magnus orchestrated this whole thing without Pierce Industries' knowledge or involvement. The company isn't implicated. You are." "You're lying," she whispered, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. "Dad might have been too trusting, but he wasn't stupid. Every major transaction, every shipping contract required both his signature and mine. You needed us both out of the way to implement Magnus's plan. That's why you convinced Emily to have me declared dead." The door to the roof burst open. Agent Kendrick emerged with several armed agents. "Margaret Pierce, you're under arrest." Margaret looked at the flash drive in her hand, then at the agents surrounding her. For a moment, I thought she might jump. Instead, she laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "You really are your father's daughter," she said as the agents took her arms. Too noble for your own good. No, I corrected her. I'm just smart enough to protect what matters. As they led her away, Agent Kendrick approached me. We'll need your help untangling all of this, Magnus Corp, the weapons deals, the money trails. You'll have my full cooperation, I assured her. But first, I need to see my sister again. Emily looked even smaller in her prison jumpsuit, her face pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. When I sat down across from her, she wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom's been arrested, I said quietly. I know, the guards told me. She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. She was using me, wasn't she? This whole time. Yes. Did you know? She swallowed hard. Did you know about the weapons? Not until today. Emily, I need to know, how much were you involved in? Did you understand what Magnus was really planning? She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. Mom just said they wanted to modernize the company, make it more profitable. I knew about the money laundering, but I thought it was just tax evasion or something. When I found out about the weapons, I was already in too deep. Why didn't you come to me? Because I wanted to prove I could handle things on my own. She burst out. You were always Dad's favorite, always the perfect daughter. For once, I wanted to be the one in control. I studied her for a moment. You know you're facing serious charges. I know, she whispered. But, I continued, if you cooperate with the FBI, tell them everything you know about Magnus and Margaret's operation. It could help your case. She finally looked up. Why would you help me, after what I did? Because despite everything, you're still my sister, and Dad believed in second chances. He would be so ashamed of me. Probably, I agreed, but he'd also want us to fix this. Together. She wiped her eyes. I'll tell them everything I know. About Mom, about Magnus, all of it. As I left the prison, my phone buzzed with a message from Agent Kendrick. Magnus Corp CEO just got arrested. Your stepmother's already talking. We're going to need your help rebuilding the paper trail. I looked up at the evening sky, thinking about Dad. He had built Pierce Industries on principles of integrity and innovation. Margaret and Emily had nearly destroyed that legacy, but it wasn't too late to save it. Tomorrow I would start the process of rebuilding, not just the company, but maybe eventually my relationship with my sister. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth doing ever was. Dad had taught me that. 1 year later, the courtroom was packed for Margaret's sentencing. I sat in the front row, watching my stepmother stand before the judge in her designer prison jumpsuit, somehow still managing to look imperious despite the circumstances. Margaret Pierce, the judge began, you have been found guilty of money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud, and facilitating illegal arms trading. The list of charges went on. In the end, she received 15 years. As they led her away, she caught my eye. Her expression a mixture of hatred and something else. Perhaps respect. I'd outmaneuvered her, protected the company, and exposed her schemes. In her own twisted way, maybe she was finally proud of me. Emily's sentencing had been different, thanks to her cooperation with the FBI, which helped bring down Magnus Corp's entire weapons operation. She received 5 years, with the possibility of parole after 3. More importantly, she had shown genuine remorse. I visited her every month at the minimum security facility where she was serving her time. Today would be different though. Today, I had news. Pierce Industries just launched its largest renewable energy project yet. I told her in the prison's visiting room. Solar farms across 3 states, wind turbines off the coast. Dad would have loved it. Emily smiled, a real smile, not the artificial one she'd worn in her socialite days. He would have. You're doing exactly what he always dreamed of. The board approved something else too, I continued. A rehabilitation program for former inmates, helping them transition back into the workforce. In about 2 years, when you're eligible for release, there could be a place for you. Entry level, of course, and with strict oversight. Her eyes widened. You'd really give me another chance. After everything. Everyone deserves a chance to rebuild, Emily, even you. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. I'm sorry, Olivia, for everything. I was so jealous, so desperate to prove myself, that I lost sight of what really mattered. I know, I said softly, but we can't change the past. We can only learn from it. Later that evening, I stood in Dad's old office, my office now, looking out over the sea. The company had not just survived the scandal. It had emerged stronger. Our commitment to renewable energy and ethical business practices had attracted new investors, partners who shared our vision. Michael knocked on the door. "The environmental impact report you wanted," he said, placing a folder on my desk. "And there's something else." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter written in my father's familiar handwriting, dated just weeks before his death. Mr. Harrison had found it while organizing old files. "My dearest Olivia," it began. "If you're reading this, something has happened to me. I need you to know that I've always seen the strength in you, not just your business acumen, but your heart. Emily struggles with feeling overlooked, and Margaret, well, I fear I've been blind to many things where she's concerned. But you, my brilliant daughter, you see clearly. Trust that vision. Lead with integrity. And remember that family, despite its flaws, can always be rebuilt. All my love, Dad." I wiped away tears I hadn't realized were falling. He had known, maybe not the extent of Margaret's deceptions, but he had known there were problems. He had trusted me to handle them. My phone buzzed. A text from Detective Martinez, who had become a friend through all of this. "Magnus Corp executives all convicted. Final appeal denied. It's really over." I texted back a simple, "Thank you." Looking around the office, I noticed something I'd missed before. In the corner, still in its original frame, was the first dollar Dad had ever earned at Pierce Industries. Below it, he had written, "Remember why you started." I did remember, and now I had my own story to add to the company's legacy. Not just one of surviving betrayal, but of rebuilding, reforming, and giving second chances. Emily would have her opportunity to earn back trust. The company would continue growing in the right direction, and I would keep moving forward, carrying the lessons of the past year. That strength comes in many forms, that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and that sometimes the hardest betrayals lead to the most important transformations. Dad had built this company on dreams of making the world better. Despite everything that had happened, that dream was still alive. Different, perhaps, tempered by experience and wisdom, but alive. And really, that's the best legacy anyone could ask for.